Welcome to the Stormsurf Video Surf Forecast for the week starting Sunday, April 20th. Brought to you by Vunabaka.com, a new surf and water-based residential community in Fiji. First, we'll take a look at the significant wave height chart for the North Pacific. We see considerable stormy weather, seas in the 18-20 foot range in the eastern Gulf of Alaska. This is associated with a strong gale that was off British Columbia and the Pacific Northwest a few days ago. It has produced solid swell that has already hit Central California, wave heights in the 17-foot range Hawaiian, and bigger up north. Also, an area of 28-foot seas is developing just west of the dateline. Otherwise, no other activity is occurring. We'll take a quick look at the jet stream level winds. These are winds at 30,000 feet or higher. The jet stream, of course, is responsible for helping to put fuel into developing storms at lower levels of the atmosphere and for directing their track. But as of right now, things are starting to wind down in the North Pacific, and our focus will be turning south probably by next week. As of right now, we have more or less a zonal flow, flat jet stream centered on 35 north, running pretty much flat across the North Pacific. A bit of a ridge here over the eastern Aleutians. Still a nice trough in the eastern Gulf with 160 knot winds pushing into it. It's responsible to helping fuel yet a little bit more fetch in the eastern Gulf of Alaska. Also, another trough in the West Pacific with about 120, maybe 130 knot winds, helping to fuel some gale development down at the surface there. Put this into motion. You notice this trough here in the Gulf pushes into the U.S. West Coast by Tuesday. Unsettled weather for that area, maybe even rain, Pacific Northwest down into maybe Central California. And things, the trough that was over the dateline pretty much washes out by later Tuesday. We continue into sort of a zonal flow with a bit of a ridge going up here. Another trough tries to get going in the eastern Gulf on Thursday with 150 knot winds, maybe supporting some, probably more weather than swell producing winds and fetch. And then that moves inland over the weekend, and after that things kind of start falling apart, and that's the end of it. No strong troughs, no real good support for storm or gale development. Next, we'll take a look at surface level winds, surface level pressure, and we're going back in time a little bit to Friday. This is the low pressure system, actually a gale that started early Friday morning. It was wound up, got pretty well organized with 50 knot wind storm status off the Pacific Northwest. This is the system that was responsible for the swell currently hitting California and should be working its way into Southern California by Monday morning. That system, of course, is petered out, but it's going to try and make a little bit of a comeback, more fetch, more swells, more seas pushing into U.S. West Coast. But at the same time here on Sunday, we'll go back just a little bit. Here is the new system forming west of the dateline, 40 knot winds, helping to generate seas there. The primary target is Hawaii. You can see that's aimed, those winds are aimed pretty well down like the 312 path to Hawaii. So that's looking decent for swell there, but not aimed so well up the Great Circle Pass to the U.S. West Coast. Put this into motion. This thing holds into Monday or so, but steadily weakens, not making much eastward progress. 35 knot winds into Monday night, even into Tuesday, and then it fades out that evening. Another low tries to organize behind it, but it doesn't get much traction. Only 35 knot winds, and it dies out by Thursday. And you can still see there's this troughiness here in the Gulf on Thursday, Friday, and as we put that in motion, you can see weather, it appears to be moving towards the Pacific Northwest. Whether it makes it into California, even Central California, is not a sure thing at all at this point in time. And then we have high pressure starting to set up on the dateline, looking very much like a springtime condition, and that's the end of it. So it looks like the season is about to wind down. And finally, significant seas. Here's the system again that was pushing into the Pacific, or developing off the Pacific Northwest over the weekend. It peaked out with about 34, almost 36-foot seas on late Friday night. But because it was so local, it pushed good size energy. No chance for that swell to decay. It was somewhat raw when it hit, but it's solid nonetheless. And then additional fetch generating 22-foot seas expected on Monday. So more swell, much smaller, but continued swell for the U.S. West Coast for several days to come. Here's the new system. We'll actually put this back. Here's the new system developing west of the dateline on Sunday. 28-foot seas. Again, targeting Hawaii the best, not so much the U.S. West Coast. Put that into motion, and it does pretty good. Now by Monday, notice less energy moving towards Hawaii, going more flat west to east, and that puts better energy up about the 300-degree track into Northern California. So maybe some small swell to result from that. And it sort of fades out. It takes a while. It gets into Wednesday before it really dies out. So yeah, good enough for 15, maybe even some 16-second period swell in these targets, but also for the Hawaiian Islands. After that, here's one final little system, 22-foot seas projected, some dribbles for Hawaii down the 312-degree path, and then it pretty much peters out, and that's the end of it. High pressure takes over. It actually does try to redevelop a little bit here in the Gulf relative to Northern California. We're way up on the 308-degree path, and this is Saturday night. Who knows? That's way far out on the model. Who knows if any of that will develop? And that's about it. Another little system trying to get going here, but it doesn't look very strong at all. Next, we'll take a look at the South Pacific, just significant wave heights for the South Pacific, and we're going back to Friday. There has been a series of small systems that have developed right on about the 180 to 190-degree path up into Southern California. You can see that here, somewhere roughly in this range. Small, very small, but then starting on Friday, something far more significant started developing, and by early Saturday morning, late Friday night, we're looking at 32, 34-foot seas developed, and that built yet even more, 40 feet by Saturday morning. Now, this isn't aimed optimally to Southern California, sort of cutting across the Great Circle paths. And these are roughly like the 185 to 192, something in that range there. But still, that's good enough to put sideband swell up into Southern California, and for that matter, even up into Northern California. But a steeper angle, 188 there for Northern California. Still, this is a pretty decent system, 41-foot seas later on Saturday. So this should be good for larger and longer period southern hemi swell, probably the first real southern hemi swell, significant class swell of the season, bound into Southern California probably on Saturday and Northern California on Sunday, and continuing for several days. You notice the system sort of peters out, but then tries to pulse again. But by then, this is really pretty much the cutoff here, about the 117-degree mark for Southern California. That was it. Also, actually, we could put this into motion. Go take a look back here. Relative to Peru, there's your main target, Peru, and even a little bit north of there. Chile, of course, will get some energy as well, so that's that. After that system, things really die out. There's not a whole lot forecast. We'll roll it out for the week here, and it just kind of goes dead. So make the most of this pulse when it comes. It sort of signals the start of the summer season. Next, we'll do a real quick look. Long-term ENSO indicators, Southern Oscillation Index. It is still on the rise as of today. Daily average 6.13. The 30-day running average is now up into positive territory, 2.17, with the 90-day average down to minus 2.41. The negative numbers here are a reflection of negative numbers in the daily and the 30-day average months ago that are now finally starting to creep into the 90-day average. Of course, so this suggests pretty much a neutral ENSO indicator, Madden-Julian oscillation short term, El Nino La Nina long term, all pretty much neutral based on the Southern Oscillation Index alone, but that is not the entire story. Again, here's another look at the Southern Oscillation Index. We've been going on this negative binge for 3 months now, starting pretty much in middle of January. All this attributed to several large negative bursts associated with the active phase of the MJO, multiples of them in a row. But now the trend seems to be backing off. We're moving into neutral territory, which is about where we've been for 2-3 years now. We'll see how this plays out. First, we'll take a look at westerly or wind deviations from normal on the equator. This is the Philippines, Australia here. Notice we have westerly anomalies in the far west Pacific, eastern maritime continent, pretty much going the whole way up to the date line. This previously was strong enough to be classified as a minimal westerly wind burst. It's still westerly, certainly no easterly anomalies. This is all indicative of the active phase of the MJO. As you go from the date line on east, a little pocket of westerly anomalies, but otherwise pretty much neutral. Here's where it gets a little more interesting. A week out, still westerly anomalies are forecast for the western Pacific. Here's Australia again, the Philippines, and they continue just about, and it's only about 3 degrees either side of the equator. That's all it takes is westerly anomalies in that area to produce. If you have a sustained westerly winds, it's called a westerly wind burst, or just westerly anomalies. Just that little bit either side of the equator, that's all it takes to start generating a Kelvin wave, warm subsurface water pushing east. Regardless, modest westerly anomalies forecast a week out for the West Pacific, and slight easterly anomalies here south of Baja, but basically a neutral pattern. So a continuation of where we've been. Weak westerly anomalies, nothing strong, nothing that would be considered a strong westerly wind burst, but still this is good. It is enough to transport warm water to the east. Here's the pattern for the past month. Reds are westerly anomalies, blues are easterly anomalies, and here's the scale. This is about the edge of the West Pacific. Here's the date line. Here's the East Pacific. So we've had continued westerly anomalies the whole way through the end of March. This is enough that we'd classify it as a small, or not a small, but a weak westerly wind burst in April. This is the 4th in a series since January 1st. More warm water, and so this transports warm water to the east. This is good. And the forecast suggests a slightly declining pattern, but certainly not out, and certainly no easterly anomalies. So this is good news. Take a quick look at the outgoing long wave radiation models. The blues are indicative of increased cloudiness and typically are associated with westerly anomalies. As you see right now, weak westerly anomalies. This model, the statistical model, suggests that more westerly anomalies are to continue for the next 2 weeks. This is great news. The dynamic model is not as aggressive. It suggests a slowly declining active phase of the MJO and less west anomalies, but west anomalies just the same. Notice the dynamic model suggests the inactive phase of the MJO building in the Indian Ocean and pushing to the east 2 weeks out, where the statistic model doesn't pick up on that at all. So a little bit of a lack of correlation between the two models. We'll see how it plays out. And finally, the upper level model. The greens suggest increased precipitation and the active phase of the MJO, the oranges and yellows, the inactive phase. So here is our current active phase. It looks to be moving east through about May 2nd and then petering out. Here comes the inactive phase in the West Pacific about the end of April, making its trek across the Pacific for about 3 weeks in May, followed by a weaker inactive or active phase of the MJO. The interesting thing is this model, as most of the other models, aren't really good at picking up either westerly wind bursts or or anything strong or even weak MJO signals. They give you the general trend, but they only pick up on real strength of it one way or the other after it's already started. So this is a general guide at best. Here's a quick look: surface level water temperature anomalies. The yellows and reds are warm water, the blues below normal water temperatures. As you can see, a couple of degrees either side of the equator. Going the whole way across the Pacific, we have warm water temperatures now. Not unbelievably warm, maybe a couple of pockets of 1 degree, but generally 0 to half a degree above normal. We're really keeping our eye out in this region to start seeing much warmer water temperatures develop, and that's due to a massive Kelvin wave that is supposedly impacting the Galapagos Island area now. We're not seeing anything yet, but it should be coming within the next week or two, we suspect. Otherwise, the whole North Pacific full of piles of warm water, especially coming into California, that area. There's no sign of any significant upwelling associated with high pressure, which suggests in and of itself that there isn't much high pressure going on. And the interesting part here is this time of year, high pressure north winds should be raging. They are blowing, but they seem less than a normal year, and that's reflected in the water temperatures here, and that might suggest that there's something in play in the atmosphere going on, but we're not going to make any commitments on that just yet. So warm water temperatures in the west. The only cool water is here. Upwelling associated with westerly flow off of Chile and Peru. Pretty much normal for the most part. No cool waters off of Africa. Nothing to suggest that the pattern's going to break down anytime soon. At least that's the hope. Surface level height anomalies. Increases in height suggest that there's warm water at depth. Warm water expands, pushing surface level waters higher than normal. This is the area we've been really focused on because there's a massive Kelvin wave that's been pushing east right under this region. The data is a little bit stale. It's 7 days old now, but still, this suggests the Kelvin wave is really focused now more in the East Pacific, but there's still warm water at depth even out to the date line. So this is good news and encouraging. And of course, the subsurface level charts, West Pacific here, East Pacific here, depth. 100 meters, 200 meters, and temperature anomalies. So currently we have a pocket of 3 degrees above normal warm water here. That was up to 5+ degrees at one point, but all that water has migrated east, almost 6 degrees here, and this is at about 95 west. The Galapagos are at 90 west. So the thought is, this is actually, and the thought also, notice there's no little X's like there are here and here. Those are sensors that normally would be operational in this area, but they're down. So this is sort of modeled. It's showing a break here, but we don't believe that's the case at all. We believe it's a continuous stream of warm water getting warmer as you go east. This is the massive Kelvin wave that pretty much goes from the date line the whole way to the Galapagos. We're expecting to start seeing these warmer waters gurgling up on the surface off the Galapagos shortly, and that should be reflected in the surface level anomaly temperature charts within the next several weeks, if not sooner. So as of right now, the Kelvin wave is still in play. We still have westerly wind anomalies here. We believe there's still a continuous migration of warm water heading east, though nowhere near as strong as the big bout we had as a result of westerly wind bursts, strong westerly wind bursts, and prolonged in January, February, and March. But still, here we are, April, more westerly anomalies, and we believe more warm water is being transported to the east. This is all good news. These are the precursors for El Nino. El Nino is not in play at this time. There is no significant warm water buildup on the surface in the East Pacific. We have to see that before one can start beginning to believe that El Nino is developing, and once those warm waters do get in play on the surface, then that affects the atmosphere above it, and that's when you start getting El Nino symptoms. So for now, this is all precursors, foundational sorts of data that would help us to project that El Nino is coming, but it is not in play at this point in time. So here's another modeled version of the Kelvin wave. Again, West Pacific here, East Pacific here. Notice this huge patch of 5 almost and 6 degree water. We think a lot of that is probably a little bit overstated. Still, there is no cool water here. This is at about 90. The Galapagos would be right here. So this Kelvin wave, at least from this model depiction, is ready to erupt. We're just waiting for it to happen. So to quickly put a bow on things, it looks like the North Pacific is winding down one last system west of the dateline, developing swell for Hawaii and the U.S. West Coast. Of more interest, a good solid storm in the South Pacific. 40-foot seas, swell is pushing north, so that will be making its way into South America, Central America, and eventually up into California probably by the weekend, and into the early part of the week beyond that. And of course, we continue to monitor the massive Kelvin wave under the equator and look for signs of El Nino. All this is pushing in the right direction. All this bodes well for next fall and maybe even the later part of the summer. So a much rosier picture than we've had for the past 3 years. So that's it. That's been our forecast. Hope you've enjoyed it. And again, many thanks to our friends at vunabaka.com. Go check out their website, vunabaka.com. Learn about the new residential community in Fiji.